name's John Wellington Ennis. I'm the director of Pay to Play. This is a film that's been in the works for many years, and it had an interesting origin because it started out as a small story of corruption in Ohio, and that spanned into a much bigger film, and then another film that was even bigger than that. And so the idea of how office isn't really accessible to people is what drove us from originally telling the story of an outrageous coin scandal with GOP insiders laundering money into the Bush campaign, morphed into how the 2004 Ohio elections were ostensibly undermined and stolen by the abuses of power of Secretary of State, which is our film Free for All. And then Pay to Play was sort of all these stories of candidates that we had come across in Ohio. And it had occurred to me that these, the ballots that everyone's struggling to be able to count and matter so much, down to every last one or two which can decide the future of America and the world. If there were more interesting names on those ballots to people, there might just be less of a narrow elections that can be so easily manipulated. And so why is it that popular people, it's so hard to prevent them from having a say in our government? And why is it that incumbents that are so regularly rated so lowly manage to stay in office? And so what Pay to Play ended up being was the story of my coming to terms as a new father, looking at the larger cycle of money in politics. It's not just kickbacks. It's an ongoing cycle, like a loop over and over again, with more and more money coming out of the public trust going to donors. And so once I managed to try to realize that was the premise of the entire movie, I thought that was going to be the movie, and then you turn around and realize, like, no, you got to show how that goes on all the time. And so now that story is in the first 5 minutes of the film before we explain the cycle of Pay to Play. And then I managed to go through Ohio, learn from different candidates there and the bellwether state. But to be able to tell the story effectively and fairly, you have to start broadening your perspective as to more and more ways that you can identify, and everything from gerrymandering to, the Koch brothers to the Supreme Court. All these different issues come into that same question of why is it so hard? How can outsiders have a voice? We've been very fortunate with Pay to Play because it tackles money in politics to be able to attract a lot of like-minded partner organizations that are working right now around that issue. It's fascinating to me, and it's really compelling to see how many different people come together around this issue that might not otherwise get a lot of play in the mainstream media. But the more we come out with it, the more people are gathering around. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, people are putting on screenings all across the country, and there's more to come. And we get reports back, and there's like 50 people at these different screenings, and they're put on by our different partner groups. And it's so compelling to me to see that kind of energy and that kind of enthusiasm. I knew that after all these things that I've just gone over with you, that to try to get people to sit through this and feel not just overwhelmed and depressed, but inspired, you were going to have a lot of extra elements to it to be able to tell a complete story. And so the idea of trying to make this, I guess I'm a child of the 70s in the sense that I grew up on Electric Company, Sesame Street, and consciously or unconsciously it really fostered this form of edutainment that I like to, pursue now. And I can only call it that because I see that in reviews of the film, and I'm like, that's what I'm doing. You're right. I got the graphics and the Muppets and everything. Jeez. And so the ways to be able to make this stuff more fun and accessible, it's not like I discovered these problems. It's not like I broke the news of the Koch brothers summits, but I can take those people, get their interviews, and then try to come up with a fun, possibly inspirational way to view it all. This film is ultimately sort of like an ode to activism or activist porn. I mean, while there is so many problems that are recounted, going back decades throughout this film, it's really built up for this sort of third act where you can see how many different people come together in ways that, they don't know each other, but they end up having huge repercussions. And you're talking person-to-person, indirect contact with, with a handful of people creating waves, thousands of peoples and supporters, toppling organizations, or at least severely setting them back, that have been going unabated for decades at the very, very top seats of power and money and influence. And so I just wanted people to know from this film that people power is not only greater than the pay-to-play system, but one person's voice has so much more impact than they could possibly think of.